Please don't do this to me. We were playing with a Ouija board. In the early hours of August 13, 2020, dispatchers in Spokane, Washington, answered a 911 call unlike any they had ever heard. On the other end, panic, screaming, and a woman begging for her life. She spoke of demons, of a man obsessed with summoning darkness, and of sudden, unthinkable violence. As her terrified voice crackled through the line, the dispatcher could barely make sense of chaos. But one thing was clear. Something horrific had just happened. When police rushed the neighborhood, the streets were quiet, almost deceptively peaceful. Neighbors hadn't noticed anyone running. No shouting, no warning. Yet inside the house, terror was unfolding. The caller, Haley, was still on the phone. Bloodied, frantic, she kept repeating the same name. Edward Martinez. Edward Martinez. 19-year-old Edward Eddie Martinez had fled on foot, leaving a nightmare behind. Officers pushed open the door and entered a home drenched in dread. On the bedroom floor lay 25-year-old Anthony, completely naked, his body soaked in blood. He was barely clinging to life. Stab wounds riddled his body. A woman, his partner Haley, stood covered in his blood, begging police to save him. Paramedics rushed in, fighting desperately to keep him alive. The air was thick with fear, grief, and disbelief. Even as medics worked to save Anthony, officers needed answers fast. Where was Martinez? Haley, still in shock, told police that Martinez was from Sacramento and didn't know the Spokane area well. The only place he recognized, a nearby liquor store. She described his clothes. Denim shorts, dark loafers, a t-shirt, details that could make the difference between capture and escape. But Martinez had vanished, leaving only blood and chaos in his wake. Would Anthony survive the brutal attack? And who exactly was Edward Martinez? The 19-year-old accused of summoning demons before turning violent. Perfect. The second chunk adds a shocking twist. The tangled relationships, the bizarre bedroom setup, and the motive rooted in insecurity. I'll reshape it into gripping narrative parts with hooks, so your viewers stay curious and uneasy. As paramedics fought to save Anthony's life, officers pressed Haley for answers. The truth that spilled out was stranger than fiction. Eddie Martinez wasn't just a stranger. Haley had met him online only weeks before. She drove to California, picked him up, and brought him back to Spokane, where he'd been living with her for 2 months. The victim, Anthony, wasn't just a random man either. He was Haley's ex-husband, still living in the same house. The three of them, Haley admitted, had been messing around in the bedroom when everything spiraled into horror. According to Haley, the playful intimacy shifted in an instant. Eddie, unable to perform, became frustrated. She believed he felt intimidated by Anthony. Then, without warning, Eddie snapped. He grabbed a knife. He drove it into Anthony's back again and again. Anthony's screams filled the room. "Ow, stop! What are you doing?" But Eddie didn't stop. He chased Anthony around the bedroom, stabbing relentlessly as Haley watched in terror. She told officers she even pretended to be injured herself, hoping Eddie would stop and leave her alive, wrapped in nothing but a blood-soaked robe. Haley was escorted to a police cruiser. From there, she could see paramedics still battling to keep Anthony alive. For a moment, hope flickered. He had a pulse. He was rushed into an ambulance and taken to the hospital. Haley wept, repeating, "He didn't deserve this. If I'd known he was in danger, I never would have let this happen." With the house secured by police tape, officers searched for any sign that Eddie Martinez had hidden nearby. Instead, they stumbled on Anthony's correctional officer uniform, a grim reminder of the victim's normal life outside this nightmare. But it was the wounds that stunned even seasoned officers. A deep slash across the chin, stabs to the chest and stomach, 4 more in his back, and countless others, perhaps 20 in total. One officer described it like a sewing machine, rapid and relentless, the blade tearing through flesh without pause. Anthony was fighting for his life. Eddie was on the run, and police were piecing together a story darker and stranger than anything they could have imagined. But where had Eddie Martinez gone? And what would they find when they caught up with him? As paramedics worked furiously, Anthony's condition grew worse. He gasped for air, each breath ragged and unnatural, what officers called agonal breathing. His chest was covered in seals where medics tried to stop the bleeding. Even officers, hardened by years of violence, admitted they had never seen so many wounds on a single body. Haley, shaken and guilt-ridden, feared the worst. Through tears she confessed, "I feel so incredibly guilty. I didn't even protect him." But officers reassured her. If the ambulance had left, Anthony was still alive. Outside, the search for Edward Martinez intensified. 9 units scoured the neighborhood. Drones scanned alleys and yards. For a while, there was no trace. It seemed Eddie had vanished into thin air. Then at 7:13 a.m., a call came in, not to 911, but to Eddie's family in Sacramento. His mother told dispatchers her son had called her, claiming he was running for his life in Spokane. Police thought it strange that he reached out to family instead of calling them, but it gave them the lead they needed. Following the tip, officers quickly found Eddie in Spokane. There was no fight, no resistance, just a quiet surrender. Surprise that went peacefully. One officer muttered over the radio. Eddie was transported to the police station, where detectives prepared to unravel what had really happened inside that blood-soaked bedroom. In the interrogation room, Eddie's voice betrayed his unease. He muttered about aliens, exhaustion, and his despair at being a man. When detectives began the formal questioning, Eddie initially asked for a lawyer. It seemed the interview was over before it had begun. But then came the bombshell. Detectives informed him that Anthony was dead. Eddie was being charged with first-degree murder. The words hit like a hammer. His response, "Okay, he is dead. You killed him." Moments later, Eddie changed his mind. "I don't need a lawyer. Forget that. I know what I did, and I'm not going to deny it." With a confession about to pour out, detectives prepared to hear the chilling truth. Why had Eddie Martinez turned a consensual encounter into a brutal killing? And what twisted thoughts were driving him in the hours before the attack? This next section really deepens the psychological side. Eddie's paranoia, his relationship with Haley, and the bizarre events with the Ouija board. I'll reframe it into suspenseful documentary-style storytelling with clear parts, while keeping the curiosity hook strong. When detectives pressed Eddie to explain his actions, his words revealed a fractured state of mind. He spoke of voices in his head, of not feeling alone in his own thoughts. He admitted he often felt paranoid, unable to trust even those he loved. Tattoos on his body told one story. His voice told another. A young man slipping deeper into delusion, convinced that something or someone was controlling him. Eddie described meeting Haley on a dating app. Their connection was instant, and soon she was living with him in Sacramento. When she decided to move back to Spokane, Eddie followed. But the living situation was anything but normal. Haley wasn't divorced yet. Her ex-husband Anthony still lived with her, the same man Eddie would later kill. At first, Eddie accepted it. But when he found intimate text messages between Haley and Anthony, his jealousy grew. He said he confronted her, but she dismissed his concerns. The resentment festered. And when Anthony's family learned of the murder, some pointed the finger directly at Haley, calling her just as responsible for the tragic outcome. According to Eddie, the night began with drinking and drugs. The three shared shots of gin and smoked potent dabs of THC concentrate. The atmosphere turned strange. Instead of partying, they pulled out a Ouija board. Eddie recalled Anthony's obsession with summoning spirits. Specifically, he wanted to call on a demon, a notorious entity known as Zozo. Eddie claimed Anthony begged for Zozo to enter the house, even though he believed it was already filled with good spirits. The board seemed to refuse his request. But Eddie said the answers he received left him shaken, planting seeds of dread before the night turned bloody. What began as drinking games and a Ouija board ritual soon spiraled into jealousy, rage, and a stabbing frenzy. But what exactly triggered Eddie to explode with such violence? According to Eddie, the night turned bizarre after midnight. Haley, he claimed, propositioned him, asking to have sex with her in front of Anthony, who sat just feet away, watching. Eddie said he felt humiliated, unable to perform because of alcohol. His body was numb, his mind spiraling. But Haley's story to police was very different. She insisted Eddie simply lost it after drinking gin and smoking weed. To her, the stabbing seemed sudden, unprovoked. The truth lay somewhere in between, buried in conflicting accounts of lust, jealousy, and rage. Eddie described the moment his fury boiled over. As Anthony joined in, rubbing against Haley, Eddie said he felt consumed by anger, a deep, uncontrollable fire building inside. Unable to process the scene, he excused himself to the bathroom, but he didn't return empty-handed. On the mantel above the fireplace, Eddie found a folding knife. He concealed it in the most chilling way possible, tucking it between his body so no one would see. Naked, he walked back into the bedroom, hiding his intent behind a calm facade. Eddie admitted to detectives that he was methodical, even sadistic. He distracted the couple by turning on Haley's phone light. He shifted the knife into reach. Then, as Anthony turned his back, Eddie seized the moment. "I just did what I never thought I would do ever," Eddie confessed. He drove the knife into Anthony's flesh again and again. Anthony cried out in agony, "Stop, I'm hurt, I'm really hurt." But Eddie didn't stop. He stabbed relentlessly, 15, 16 times, puncturing both chest and back until Anthony's lungs gurgled with blood. Chillingly, Eddie compared the act to hunting. He recalled how, as a boy, he had snapped the necks of wounded animals, a moment that once gave him an adrenaline rush. Killing Anthony, he said, felt like that same rush, but fleeting. "I lost control," Eddie told detectives. "When I gained it back, it was too late. I miss Anthony. He was an all-right friend. I don't know what drove me to take his life." Eddie's chilling confession left detectives stunned, but the brutality of the crime was undeniable. The question now wasn't whether Eddie Martinez had killed Anthony, but whether the twisted love triangle and strange obsession with demons would explain the madness or seal his fate forever. The weapon was a simple folding utility knife, its 4-inch blade stained with Anthony's blood. Eddie admitted he lashed out in fury, stabbing until Anthony begged, "Please stop. We can talk about this." But Eddie didn't stop. Haley, frozen in horror, recalled only whispering the same words again and again. "You're scaring me. You're scaring me." The brutality had unfolded like a switch. One moment tension, the next sheer terror. She told detectives he pinned her to the bed and said, "We're going to go." But she refused. Eddie then tossed the knife aside, desperately begging for help. "You got to get me out of here. You got to hide me. I can't go to jail." But Haley resisted. Instead of helping, she backed away, clutching Anthony's body, while Eddie frantically dressed and begged for escape. Haley had told him she recognized the look in his eyes, a sadistic shift in his personality that she'd seen before. Eddie admitted he sometimes experienced episodes where he simply didn't give a F asterisk asterisk. Asterisk. He confessed that he may have been plotting the stabbing even before leaving the room to go pee. The premeditation wasn't a sudden bathroom decision. It had started in his mind while watching Haley and Anthony together. The murder, investigators realized, wasn't a split-second snap. It was a dark intention building inside Eddie, long before the blade touched skin. When asked if he'd ever fought with Anthony before, Eddie said no. But when the detective turned questioning toward Haley, the truth took a shocking turn. Their relationship, Eddie admitted, had been rocky. Yet he insisted they still loved each other. Then, almost casually, he revealed a bombshell. "I honestly feel like we have a kid on the way. She's pregnant." The detective froze. Haley had never mentioned it. Eddie's sudden claim left more questions than answers. Was it true, or just another desperate attempt to tether himself to Haley? Before leaving Eddie alone, the detective promised to let him write a letter to Haley. Eddie nodded. His last request wasn't about Anthony, the friend he'd slaughtered, but about the woman who might still carry his child. Left alone in the interrogation room, Eddie's mask slipped again. Talking to himself, he revealed raw, unsettling thoughts, the kind of confessions never meant for human ears. And it was in that solitude that his darkness came out in full. This is a powerful ending. It shows Eddie going from delusion and self-pity to the cold reality of 27 years in prison. I'll keep the same part-by-part storytelling with curiosity hooks, so you can easily slot this into your video script. Left alone with pen and paper, Eddie began writing his letter to Haley, but halfway through, the tough facade cracked. He sobbed, whispering to himself, I'm not going to see you for a while. I'm supposed to be a dad. I'll never love again. Why did I follow in my dad's footsteps? His words blurred between regret and denial, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could still be there when his child was born. When the pen was taken away, Eddie continued talking to himself, recording his thoughts like a man rehearsing for an audience that didn't exist. He confessed outright. I killed a man, stabbed him like 8 times. I know I have blood on my hands, literally, but in my head, I felt like I did what was right. I can't bring myself to think it was right. I should have just beat his ass. He questioned why he went so far, why he bottled up his anger until it exploded, why one drunken night spiraled into murder. Yet even in that moment of truth, Eddie still searched for loopholes, wondering if good behavior might get him out early. His thoughts always circled back to Haley, to the child he claimed was on the way, to a family he would never truly have. But while Eddie rationalized in circles, the evidence told a different story. Anthony Bryan, just 25 years old, had been stabbed a staggering 20 times. 14 wounds to the chest and abdomen, 5 wounds to his back, 1 wound to his right arm. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Detectives gathered DNA, photographs, and clothing. Eddie Martinez, just 19 years old, was formally charged with first-degree premeditated murder. In April 2023, he stood trial. The jury listened, weighed the evidence, and returned their verdict. Guilty. The sentence, 27 years in prison. But Eddie wasn't done. In February 2025, he filed an appeal, clinging to one last chance. The Court of Appeals reviewed his case and upheld both the conviction and the sentence. Eddie's fate was sealed. As the cell door closed, Eddie Martinez was left with the echoes of his own words. I killed a man. I got blood on my hands, but I just want to come home. Anthony Bryan's life was gone. Haley's world was shattered. And Eddie, once a teenager chasing love and loyalty, would spend the next 3 decades behind bars. Haunted by the night, he chose violence over control. 1 knife, 1 choice, 20 stab wounds, a lifetime erased. Was Eddie's crime born of rage, jealousy, or something far darker? That's for you to decide. Let us know your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that dig deep into the minds behind the madness.